It's time for the Volquest Podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good news, everybody, and welcome to the Volquest Podcast. I'm Eric Cain with Rob Lewis and Brent Hubbs. Plenty to discuss here as Tennessee is coming off a 52-49 win over then number 3 Alabama. Tennessee now moves up to number 3 in the latest AP poll. At number 4 in the coaches poll, a trio of Volunteers bring home SEC weekly honors from the conference. Jalin Hyatt, of course, the offensive player of the week. Chase McGrath, the special teams player of the week. And Darnell Wright, the co-offensive lineman of the week. A lot of good stuff happening for Tennessee, and you can find it all at volquest.com, $1 for 1 year. And as always, subscribe to the channel on YouTube by searching Volquest. Brent, a lot of good things happening for Tennessee. Tennessee is now 6-0, 3-0 in SEC play, and has UT Martin this week, of course, and then the rest of the SEC schedule will come after.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's an exciting time for anybody who's a Tennessee fan. Been wandering through the jungles for a long time in the wilderness, looking for moments, and what a moment Tennessee had on Saturday. Here's a debating question to start off, Rob Lewis. We'll throw this to you. All those guys who won SEC honors are very deserving of that. Whose performance was better, Jalin Hyatt or Darnell Wright against Will Anderson?
I mean, I didn't watch it in minute detail like you, however. I don't know how often that Anderson was matched up against Wright, for all the snaps he was on there. But I mean, in hindsight, there was so much going on immediately after the game with the field goal, the last drive, Hyatt's day, Hooker and Bryce Young doing. Having Will Anderson just be a non-factor is really one of the most surprising things in a game that was full of surprises. I mean, when you go back and look at it, not only did he not wreak havoc, I mean, he didn't do much of anything in the game.
He was responsible for one play.
I had it here in front of me a minute ago.
He had a hand in the interception.
He had one solo tackle, and he was credited with half of a tackle for a loss.
Again, there's no wrong answer. Okay. I mean, when you look, you set a record for 5 touchdowns. You obviously played unbelievable football as a wide receiver. I guess for me, it's the bigger surprise is that Darnell Wright leading that offensive line and the day that they had. That they are the story. I've called Jalin Hyatt the best story on this team. I continue to believe that. But the story of the growth of this team from year 1 to year 2 is not. It's not Hendon Hooker to me. I mean, Hendon Hooker's gotten a lot better. It's the offensive line, Eric. I mean, what they're doing, what they did on Saturday is as good an offensive line play as I've seen Tennessee have in a long time. Okay, and I watched a lot of good offensive line play when Philip Fulmer was the head coach. What they did Saturday, following up what they did at LSU, that's 2 of the best weeks of offensive line play I've seen out of Tennessee in decades.
Yeah, no doubt.
And over a decade, let me say that.
For sure. I mean, they've been fantastic the last couple of weeks. And, what I was trying to say about Will Anderson Jr. before I jumped all over Rob, apologies there, was he really only made one play. He pushed J.J. Crawford back in there and there was some other pressure on the other side as well, but forced that high throw. But credit to them for neutralizing both the edge players. I mean, did a fantastic job. Alabama had 1 sack, and really it was a coverage sack. It was from up the middle, DJ Dale, when nobody was open downfield. But, I mean, you're putting up nearly 570 yards of total offense against Alabama. You're averaging over 8 yards per play against a Nick Saban coached Alabama defense. You are running for 182 yards. If you take the net of the rushing total, it was almost 200 yards for Tennessee, Hendon Hooker and those 2 backs. And it's all because of that offensive line. The physicality that it's playing with didn't back down from the challenge. Brent, I thought both, Gerald Mincey did a couple things. I thought Jeremiah Crawford filled in and played really, really well for the most part. This is a group that has a lot of experience. All these guys played last year, with the exception of Mincey, who wasn't here, and Crawford, who was a backup. But even he got a little bit of playing time last year. But I think you're seeing the growth and the development, the gelling of that unit. And of course, this offense goes to Hendon Hooker goes, but somebody's got to block for him, and they've been fantastic.
Cooper Mays played the best game he's played in a Tennessee uniform on Saturday, and it's not close, in my opinion. I thought Cooper Mays was really good, and they were really good overall. Glenn Ellerby's done a heck of a job with them, and Rob, you mentioned that it's hard to unlayer all these things from from the win on Saturday. And it's, as fans, that's what you get to do. I mean, obviously the team is moving forward with a focus, but try to unlayer it all for you. And I know you wrote it in you wrote some things in the 3-2-1. What was your next day react or your Monday? I mean, kind of when you started to decompress and unpack just the craziness that it was, what's your overarching takeaway?
I mean, probably the biggest big picture thought is that was the best college football game I think I've ever seen. I mean, it had everything in it. And, maybe, I even heard, Barrett Jones say that on the, that was the best SEC game that he had ever seen, on the Alabama broadcast, even though it didn't work out his way. And I could rattle a lot of them off. Tennessee's legit, Hubbard. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Even though I picked Tennessee to win last week, on the record, you can look it up. I still thought it might be, not necessarily that they would win because Tennessee was the second or third best team in the league or in the country. Just that it just felt like everything was going to go in their way. Like the moment, the fans. I mean, but I thought it would have been an upset. Like you know what, Hubbard? I just now thought of it. 3 days later, that's probably my biggest takeaway is that wasn't an upset. Tennessee was better than Alabama on Saturday, and they were better without two starting defensive backs and their best wide receiver, or at least what's been their most productive wide receiver. Whether he's still their best wide receiver, I guess is open for debate. But 72 hours later, I don't call that an upset.
Meanwhile, you go look at the leaders for receiving touchdowns in the entire country. Jalin Hyatt is up at the top with 10. Marvin Harrison Jr., who's also played only 6 games, is right behind him at 9. But he went from 5 to 10 in one game. Just, that's the type of performance, of course. And, that's the lead. Jalin Hyatt was fantastic. But, that's the type of performance you're going to look back on and say, you'll tell your kids, you'll tell your friends about 20, 30 years down the line when Tennessee snapped that 15-game losing skid, who stepped up, who played well. Jalin Hyatt, his pure speed. One-on-one matchups with the safety a couple of different times. One time just split the nickel and the safety right up the middle. No one could catch him. He was fantastic. And I heard Jason Swain say this on Josh and Swain the other day as well. I mean, he only got hit. He only got hit on like 2 or 3 of those. I think he had 6 receptions. He only got hit on 2 or 3 of those, right? He outran everybody.
Hubbard, correct me if I'm wrong. Am I remembering this right? No South Carolina offer coming out of high school from Will Muschamp. Is that accurate?
Slow played. Yeah, slow played. There was a lot of, if I'm not mistaken, that there were a lot of people who, they weren't sure and everything else, and obviously Tennessee was, and the system has worked to him. And again, I think the credit it goes to Jalin Hyatt. I mean, it's all about what Jalin Hyatt has done over the last 10 months. Now, Kelsey Pope has been a huge catalyst for that. Kelsey took him under his wing when he was an analyst and kept him engaged. Bayless Jones certainly told him and gave him good advice when he left. But at some point, you got to make a commitment, right, Eric? You got to make a commitment to decide I'm going to be a good player. And when he made a commitment, he's made an all-in commitment that he's not wavered on. Even in the postgame, he's still trying to downplay like he hadn't done anything. It's like, hey, Hoss, that's the best performance to me, in terms of what I've witnessed. That's the best performance of a Tennessee wide receiver. Prior to that, it was Kelly Washington against LSU.
2001.
In 2001, his coming out party. That's the best performance I've seen by a wide receiver at Neyland Stadium. And to do it against that team, and I thought Alabama had some secondary concerns and questions, but man, Josh Heupel and Alex Golis said, we want him matched up here and we will win all day long. And when they got it, they did.
Yeah,
because of him.
Did. And, this is the guy that sat back, was not a happy guy last year. Things were not going his way. Took help from Bayless Jones, who acted as kind of a mentor. Kelsey Pope, who acted as a mentor, said that as soon as the Music City Bowl was over with, came right back. I don't know if it's that night, but came right back, started working the facility. And then you just sensed it when we caught up with some of these players over spring practice, just a different mindset. He said, I haven't done anything. He even said that after the Akron game when he scored a touchdown on the first play of the game, hadn't done anything, or the Ball State, whoever it was. But then he has done some things, and he's still, pressing on, knowing that the team is bigger than any individual conflicts or accomplishments. So good for him. That's that is a perfect example of total buy-in, and he's a great story without a doubt. Hendon Hooker also, throwing in those football. Those are some dimes in there. He continues to, pad on to his Heisman campaign. Another really good performance, completing 70% of passes thrown against a Nick Saban coach defense. He only made a couple of mistakes. Obviously, the ball sailed when he got hit, and that was his only interception. The exchange between he and the running back there, backed up in the own end zone. That's obviously not one that you like. I believe that was Jabari Small, not one that you like. And then there was one false start called on Tennessee's offense whenever he snapped the ball when the receivers weren't set. But I mean, really, those are the three things that come to mind when I think of what Hendon Hooker didn't do well in this football game. He was Superman to beat Florida. He obviously played exceptionally well to beat Alabama. Hendon Hooker is arguably the best player in the country right now, and it's a whole lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, the penalty was a blessing for Tennessee because they failed on that fourth down. They weren't going to make it there, and then they get the next play and they get the pass interference penalty to extend that drive there because Hendon Hooker went too fast. It goes back to Rob, to your point earlier about Will Muschamp not taking Jalin Hyatt and Hendon Hooker not thriving at Virginia Tech because they didn't know how to use him. It reminds you just how complicated recruiting is, right? I mean, Jim Chaney didn't think Jahmyr Gibbs was a tailback in the SEC, and neither did most of the rest of the SEC, right? That's why he ended up at Georgia Tech. It's hard. It's hard to find and figure out who can play and who can't play, and it's all about fit. And for some of these guys, they found the right fit, and the right fit has been Josh Heupel's offense. But it's just a reminder to me that the recruiting side of this thing is such an inact science, man. It's just it's a challenge to try to figure it out. You can take all the measurables you want, but that doesn't always mean everything, Rob.
No, and I tell you, you know this better than me, and it's not just physical. I mean, a big part of it is you're dealing with 17, 18, 19-year-old male boys / young men, and having been one and having had a couple. I mean, who the hell knows what you're going to get, one day to the next. It's hard to project, 3 years down the road. What's this kid going to mature into? What's his work ethic going to be like? He's been the best player on every playground and every football field and basketball court his whole life. What's his response going to be like when he's not, and he has to work? And I mean, there's a ton that goes into it. Before we move on from what you were talking about, Hooker, the most impressive thing to me about the day was, and it's been the key the whole season, is the combination of accuracy and efficiency and absolute balls to the wall, pushing it down the field. He completed 70% of his passes at 18.5 yards of completion. That's big time. Against the best pass defense in the SEC coming into Saturday, that's remarkable.
One other thing about not just Hooker, this entire team's mentality, this offensive mentality, resiliency. But again, I asked Princeton fan about this on Monday, and he immediately went to Hendon Hooker. I mean, the fumbled exchange there, backed up, Dallas Turner scoops it up and scores. He could have scored from 30 yards out. It was 11, but he could have scored from 30 or 40 yards out, whatever. And Alabama goes up 49-42 with just under 8 minutes left. And you're sitting there, everybody in the stadium sitting there saying, okay, so this is how Tennessee's going to lose, right? And he gets everybody up, the offense over there, and says, hey, we're going to march down and score again. Just the resiliency, the bounce back factor for this team. And not just the offense. Again, Brent, you wrote about it in 10 Things You Think You Learned, the drive no one's going to be talking about. Hendon Hooker throws that interception. Brent, remind me, Tennessee is losing 35-34 at that point, right?
Yep. They're down one.
And the defense forces a punt for Alabama after the lone interception of the season from Hendon Hooker. Just that type of mentality. I talk about complimentary football all the time. Especially if from the defense, you might give up some points, but trade sixes for threes, create some turnovers, all that type of stuff. That right there is complimentary football at its best. Pick your offense up when something goes wrong. There weren't many stops in this football game, but that was a huge one. I'm just so impressed with how this team is. And again, it's a reflection of coaching and the head man and Josh Heupel of how this team has just adapted that mentality. It's a veteran group, and they're playing that way, and they played like that at points in times and big moments, Brent, on Saturday against the Crimson Tide.
Well, and again, that's there's a lot of storylines, Rob, right? We can dissect it in a million different ways, X's and O's, and what Josh Heupel and Alex Golesh do to get guys open, and the development of Rodney Garner's group. There's a lot of on-field things to look at. But you were talking about 17 to 22-year-olds trying to figure out what they're doing. And Rick Barnes has done a terrific job of this in basketball, but you do it with smaller numbers, right, of getting everybody to buy in. And if you don't buy in, then you're not going to be here. Tennessee's ability to get this group of guys, many of them who are playing weren't signed by this coaching staff, to get them to do what Eric's just talking about is more remarkable than anything they've accomplished X's and O's wise.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, because this is a team that, I mean, we've all talked about, but they went into that game on Saturday expecting to win the football game. I mean, 100%. And I don't care what anybody has said, what quotes have come out of, media day for the last going on 10 years. I don't believe Tennessee players have felt that way. I'm sure, they said they did, said all the right things, but yeah, the amount of buy-in, the amount of belief and confidence that they've instilled, it's incredible to see. And I'll tell you what else, Hubbard, I think the staff does a good job of, is they don't write kids off just because, not saying if there's an off the field incident or something that you have to, sure, but just because they're not working the way you want to, or maybe the attitude isn't exactly where and Jalin Hyatt's a perfect example. I mean, we've all covered staffs around here where, a talented kid doesn't get on board and he's in the doghouse, and really the only way to get out is, if you have a bunch of injuries in front of you or you transfer. And they just, I think they do a great job of just saying, of telling themselves or whatever, he's not ready right now, but let's not give up on him, balls in his court, et cetera. I mean, I think you can see that, Jawan Mitchell, I think is another example of that. And, we've got I think there's several guys on the team that the buy-in is still not there, but, they haven't been run off yet. I mean, if it's a talented guy who's not a problem, they just, they don't just sweep him to the side. And I think we've seen a lot of coaches where, make knee-jerk reactions. Boom, this kid can't help us. I'm done with him. Particularly
if he's not your guy. If he's the guy you inherited, right? I mean, I didn't recruit him. He's not my guy. We're gonna off. There's a lot of, they're all Josh Heupel's guys now, right? Because of what they've done the last 17 months. There's a lot of guys playing big roles, Eric, who were not Josh Heupel's guys. All right. I mean, he didn't evaluate him. He didn't go recruit them or anything like that. And for those guys who are perceived as the bad news bears of college football 19 months ago, to be sitting in the top 5 unbeaten, having beat more top 25 teams than anybody in the country, and just ended a 15-year streak to Alabama. I mean, if somebody just, what's your line, Rob? If somebody just wakes up from a coma, right? You wrote those columns years ago. If somebody just woke you up and you've been asleep the last 18 months, there's no way they would have believed. There's no way they would believe where Tennessee football is right now.
And I'll tell you another thing about Heupel, and I know we've made this point before, but unlike a lot of coaches that we've covered in both football and basketball, I mean, and Hubbard, I don't remember this ever happening, and maybe you do, but he never complained about the roster. He never complained about, we don't have this, we don't have these kind of guys. And that's a 180 from the guy he replaced and the guy before that. It was always just, this is what we've got. Let's go to work.
Yeah, and I haven't seen Josh Heupel do any halftime interviews saying we just need more players. And another guy that you're kind of referencing in terms of don't give up on players, and it certainly has not had the fairy tale ending just yet, but he's still there in the facility. He's still there on the sidelines. Jimmy Callaway. How many times have we heard Jimmy Callaway has this much potential? He does this. He's not bought in. He punches a guy. He's still there. They're not giving up on him. So we'll see how that one turns out.
I mean, he's not playing.
Yeah.
But he's not been run off. I mean, the opportunity's here for you.
You could also say, you can also look to Brandon Turnage, right? I mean, and credit to Brandon Turnage, right? He gets a start last year as Player of the Week, and then he disappears, and he's not on the depth chart this year. Then you look out there Saturday, and he's playing. He's prepared to play, and he's playing with confidence, because even though he hadn't been playing, for whatever reason, they haven't completely buried him to the point that he's packing up and going to the house. And now he's going to get opportunities until the secondary gets healthy. I think he's going to get more and more opportunities. I thought Turnage played well on Saturday against Alabama. For the situation he was put in, I thought Brandon Turnage held his own fine, just as Deshaun Rucker did. And I would tell you this, when I walked out of Nashville after that Purdue loss, I wasn't sure Deshaun Rucker would ever see the field at Tennessee again. But there he was Saturday, hanging on. Was it great? No, but he was hanging on out there Saturday trying to survive. And he got hosed on the pass interference call in the end zone, not even close. Yeah. Bad call.
Horrible call. And that, again, you kind of went into the secondary there, and I wanted to go there next because, I echo what you said. Brandon Turnage played 20 snaps in this football game, continued to build confidence. Deshaun Rucker obviously played a huge part in this football game, and I thought did some things. Danico Slaughter. I mean, all these guys were not perfect. All these guys, got beat on a couple of plays. I mean, again, there's as Josh Heupel said, I mean, these players, sure, enjoy the win, know what you did, know what you accomplished. They got a rude awakening when they watch that tape, and that's okay. That's football. I thought Danico Slaughter did a couple good things, but when you look out there on that last drive of the last defensive series of the football game for Tennessee, Deshaun Rucker goes out the series before. I thought it was a cramp. I thought he was going to be back in, but he wasn't back in. It was Brandon Turnage out there. Then Christian Charles comes up and grabs his hamstring, whether it be a hamstring or a cramp, whatever the case may be. He goes out. And you've got William Wright out there at the other cornerback spot. And he plays 4 snaps, the last 4 snaps of the football game. And Bill O'Brien knew it, went after him. He makes the tackle. If he lets go and he lets that guy get loose, it's game over. Whatever. Brandon Turnage is out there. I just think it continues to be a testament to say if you continue to work, if you continue to buy in, if you continue to prepare as if you are the guy. William Wright in spring practice was the guy. Everybody was hurt. Everybody was out, off-season surgery, whatever. And he took advantage of that time. I'm not saying he's going to be a player down the line, but I'm just saying in the biggest moment of the season, you have a walk-on over there at cornerback and job well done. It's just another thing that you can look back on this game and just say, holy crap. And Rob, what you just kind of said, it just felt like everything was moving a Tennessee way. And that's just another example.
Which Rob is the craziest thought, given the last 15 years. Not just in this series, but the last 15 years of football, that something was going Tennessee's way, because those of us with the battered syndrome were waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Oh my God! I mean,
it's like, okay, here it comes. All right, they turned it over, they threw an interception. Here it comes. It's going to be an 8-point lead, and then all the pressure's on Tennessee to answer, and then it's going to become a 2-score lead. And okay, here we go. Then they fumble it, and it's okay. That's how this is going to end. Then they throw the pick, that ended up being defensive pass interference. Okay, here they go. I mean, but at the same time, too, everything, Tennessee made all of their breaks. They answered the bell, unlike other teams have been able to do. And then Josh Heupel says with 15 seconds to go, hey, guys, let's just go win it. I mean, he's the only coach I've covered at Tennessee who would have ever thought about running a play to try to get in field goal range with 15 seconds to go.
You don't think Lane would have done it?
Remember this, and I'll tell this story now. In the blot game in Tuscaloosa, the 12-10 game, the Cody game in Tuscaloosa, they throw it to Luke Stocker to get quote in field goal range. Daniel Lincoln's got a got a slightly pulled hamstring. He was not 100%. They ran it up the middle and centered the ball up like he had Sebastian Janikowski kicking from 48 yards instead of trying to get more yardage. Jim Chaney, they call timeout. We're standing in the booth. The coach's booth is next to us. We're all over there going like, wait a minute, you didn't run another play? Whatever. Jim Chaney looks, he's like, gives the old, relax, guys. We're good. It's good. Ball never had a chance. Even if Cody doesn't get it, that ball's not good. They did not aggressively try to get closer. Much the same way Nick Saban didn't manage the clock the right way at the end of the game.
Botched.
To give Tennessee a chance. Job. So it's just the little things here and there, and Tennessee capitalized on the little things, which they haven't been able to do for a long time, Rob.
No, I mean, and I think an underrated aspect of, I mean, people have talked about it, but it's not been talked about a lot. Heupel goes for 2 after the missed extra point. Like, doesn't even think about it. Like he knew, during that drive, like, hey, if we score here, I'm going for 2. I'm not, I don't. Maybe that's what his chart did say, or maybe, I mean, I think just as likely he just felt like, hey, we're going to tie this thing up, and that's not going to be hanging over our heads. I mean, just another small example of, I mean, he just does not coach scared at all, ever. I mean, he doesn't think about what happens if we don't get the extra 2-point conversion. They score again, and now we're down 2 scores. It's not about, he doesn't think about the negatives. I mean, what are the rewards?
Rob, I asked Austin and Brent in the post-game mini pod, right after, and I want to ask you here because I want to hear your opinion. Tennessee beats Alabama. Tennessee is now 6-0. Tennessee's undefeated. Tennessee's number 3 in the country. We cover this team. We know the shortcomings. We know the deficiencies and all that, but this is a good football team. What's the outlook on the season now? When you say, all right, the rest of the way, maybe not expectations. Maybe that's a bad word for it, but how do you see this thing in terms of expectation is the right word. What do you expect for Tennessee the rest of the way? I mean, we're talking, very much in play against Georgia, of course, very much in play for an SEC championship, big picture stuff. Now, with Tennessee actually cemented its stance as being a player because they are.
If Tennessee does, I don't see them doing any worse than 11-1 regular season at all. I think they'll. I know Tennessee. Kentucky has football Jesus, Will Levis under center. I acknowledge that, but I think Tennessee hammers them. I don't think they're exciting at all. I don't think there's any chance they can score with Tennessee. And the best thing they do is run the football. And suddenly, halfway through the season, the best thing Tennessee does on defense is stop the run. So I don't think you can play ball control against it. And Georgia, to me, I don't know. Georgia will be a slight favorite in that game, and they should be. But Tennessee can win that football game. Heck, you can call me crazy. I think if you're just talking about getting to the college football playoff, I think it's better for Tennessee if they lose in Athens, finish 11-1, and have Georgia and Alabama beat each other up in Atlanta. Do you feel great about winning a rematch with that? Sure, Tennessee can do it, but we saw what happened to Alabama last year after they hammered Georgia pretty good in Atlanta and then turned around and lost. I know you're taking a risk because you kind of, if Tennessee were to lose in Athens, then you don't really control your own destiny anymore. But man, I didn't do like an extreme deep dive into researching it, Hubbard, but I know you've looked at it some too. I don't think there's anybody that would be close to having the kind of resume Tennessee would have among what would be your one-loss teams out there. Either Michigan or Ohio State, USC or UCLA. It's just nothing. Nothing close to the wins that Tennessee has.
No, and again, it's funny you mentioned that because the former assistant coach and I were having a conversation just before we started doing this podcast. And he asked me the same question. He goes, I don't want to, that they should want to go win an SEC championship because winning an SEC championship is special. It's really special. But when you're talking about the blueprint of the playoff, are they better off if they do go and lose a regular season game and don't make the championship game? Does losing in the championship game knock you out more than losing a regular season game if you're a win-loss football team in this league? Interesting question. A question I never dreamed that would be on the debate table with this Tennessee football team, even at the start of this year. And certainly I didn't dream it when Tennessee made the changes that they made in the departure of Jeremy Pruitt and hiring Danny White, and obviously Danny White hiring Josh Heupel.
Now, allow me, the football player in me's got to get this out there on the record and a microphone. If Tennessee goes out and doesn't show up, Kentucky can beat them. Georgia can obviously beat them. This team is not invincible, all right? So you still got to go and be ready to play, but as Rob pointed out, there's no sense in Tennessee not whipping up on Kentucky or some of these other teams on the schedule not named Georgia. So,
well, you got to stay healthy, okay? Yeah. In some critical spots, you got to really stay healthy.
You are not healthy in the secondary right now.
No, well, and you're challenged there all the way through. But this is no offense to Joe Milton, but this is a very different football team if the guy going to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony is not under center or in the shotgun, right? You got to continue to improve, and I think individually continue to improve. And I think some guys on this team are getting better, but you've got to continue to for guys to grow and improve and develop moving forward. But yeah, that's the beauty of college football is every week as you continue to win, every week becomes a bigger and bigger playoff game. And that'll be the case for Tennessee and Kentucky coming up as well. And I don't know, it's just fun. And it's fun to watch this team, and we'll see how much they continue to grow. And they're going to let it all hang out and let it go. And there are going to be new wrinkles along the way. I think that's something else that Rob doesn't get talked about. There's new offensive things. We had some blitzes we hadn't seen from Tim Banks. he's throwing and adding a few new wrinkles here and there. And then offensively, they've done 2 or 3 things each week that their opponent hasn't seen yet. And they've caught teams off guard with it. I mean, tightening that formation down. I mean, hell, think about this. I mean, they went under center with an offset eye inside the 5-yard line against Alabama. Who had that on the bingo card, Rob Lewis?
Not me.
So
Definitely not. With Princeton Fant at fullback.
And Brew McCoy is the tight end on the left side.
I mean, it's the little nuances of the wrinkles, right? The Jalin Hyatt touchdown out of the real tight bunch formation, that was a new wrinkle off of the jet sweep look and the shovel pass look that they played at LSU, right? They brought a new thing into it. It's actually basically the play LSU ran with Booty, where he slipped and fell on the 4th down play on their first possession second possession where Tennessee got the stop in Baton Rouge. It's a very similar play that they ran there. And they obviously ran it to perfection for a touchdown and a new wrinkle. They're doing something. They're doing a couple of new things each week that is really winning against an opponent because they're not prepared for it.
Anything else from Tennessee, Alabama? Rob, you got the last word for this game. Then I want to talk some recruiting just for a moment. But, I mean, what a win for this program, for this team. Obviously, they don't want to stop here, and there's 6 more games to be played in the regular season. But anything else from a win for Tennessee that was 15 years in the making?
Man, I mean, it was surreal, and it was just it was fun to watch, and I know Hubbard is like this too. When you have so many relationships with so many people that have invested so much into the program and have not gotten very much return on that investment and their passion, and 10, 12, 15 years, I felt really happy for those guys. I mean, people that are behind the scenes, their names don't show up in headlines, but who work their butts off and devote a big chunk of their time and their life to the program and to the university and take so much pride in it. Felt really good to see those kind of behind the scenes folks get to enjoy it. And I have a son who is a junior at UT right now, and the memories that he has from this weekend are just it'll be something he'll remember his entire life.
Yeah, and it's as a parent of a kid who hasn't had the opportunity to experience that, it's a cool deal, right? I mean, I remember 85 when Tennessee won down there after Tony Robinson went down, and you thought that game was over, and I vaguely remember a little bit of 82, and I had an opportunity as a very young person in the business to be there in 95 when it happened. But for people of all ages, for them, and that was the cool thing in the post-game deal. And then, Eric, I'm going to get to you with some recruiting stuff for you. But that was the beauty of the post-game when you look at this, was it was all walks of, it was all ages sharing in it together. And for some guys, it was the first time ever, and then for some other guys, it was remembrances of 82 and how that felt compared to this one and all those types of things. So that part of it was really, really cool. Special night, a night nobody's going to forget anytime soon. This football team's got to try to forget it and move forward. I think the schedule sets up for them great this week, obviously, but certainly a special night. Now, the byproduct of that night long-term, Eric, is going to be on the recruiting standpoint. You put on a great show, and Tennessee had a lot of great people, a lot of great talent in the house watching that thing. Feels like Tennessee's got some momentum with some guys, and where they go from here. To me, it starts with Hobbs. Hobbs being back here, seeing Tennessee officially for Florida, that environment, and coming back and seeing this unofficially, that cannot be a bad thing for Tennessee at all, right?
No, it's definitely not a bad thing for Tennessee. Obviously, he's number 1 on your board, and this is the second time he's been here this season, and they've both been really, really good games. Again, Hobbs or anybody else. A lot of these guys who were here for the Florida game, also here for the Alabama game, and how can it get any better, right?
And with Hobbs, it's about Alabama. Tamarian Parker was here. The hard part with Tamarian Parker for Tennessee is he's going to see Clemson right before he commits, and he seems to like everywhere he goes. And so getting the last visit with him, I think, is a big deal. And so that'll be hard for Tennessee. Then, where are they going to be with running back? Eric, I think, is intriguing. And then obviously from an in-state perspective, they've had the opportunity to put on a big show for those 24s and 25s all season long. Which again, I think this is where this staff has caught up the most in recruiting, has been what they've been able to do in building relationships with the class of 24 and the class of 25.
Yeah, I was going to say this. I mean, Eric, you're more dialed in the nuts and bolts, but I think you're too deep into the 23 cycle, and there's just too few guys out there. I mean, in Pimba, Hobbs, Parker. I mean, definitely big time players, but it's not like you have 15 or 20 targets that you're still, heavily involved with. I think this win resonates big time with the 24s, 25s, especially the in-state kids.
Yeah,
Tennessee for kids that aren't deep in the recruiting process or just getting out and starting to take visits, sophomores for sure, some juniors. Tennessee set the bar pretty damn high on Saturday. Pretty high.
This is a game to where, if you're 24s or 25s, you'll be going on other game day visits, rest of the season next year. And this is a measuring stick type game. It's like, oh, well, it wasn't as good as that Tennessee-Alabama game. So for the 24s that continue to come back, I mean, it's a big storyline. Boo Carter, Spillman, Edwin Spillman, Caleb Beasley, Gorey from Bradley Central, all these guys, they could just continue to come back. That's huge. Tyler Scott was here. He is a 2023 prospect, defensive back, safety guy, and I think that it looked like that went well. I think he had a good time, and still expecting Jerry Mack to go and see Khalifa Keith play probably this weekend, and potentially an offer could come out there. But Tamir McDonald, who was here, Tennessee Clemson, late November, somewhere around Thanksgiving. David Hobbs here again. It's going to commit late November on the November 25th. Those were some big fish that were here, and ultimately Tennessee did a really, really good job for all those guys. I mean, it couldn't have been any better, Brent Hubbs.
Well, the atmosphere certainly couldn't have been any better. And here's the other thing too, Rob. For 17 months, you sold more hopes and dreams than you have tangible proof. And that's not to say last year went bad, right? But your proof last year was, hey, we got into the second half against Alabama. We need you. Right. Or, hey, we got into the red zone 5 times against Georgia. Yeah, we couldn't finish it, but you're the missing piece, this, that. You're selling it more off of hope as opposed to tangible results. You walk into schools, you walk into homes very differently when you do what Tennessee's done through the first 6 games of this football season, highlighted by what they did on Saturday, because it's not about seeing a vision or trying to picture that vision. That vision is now. You're showing it with a resume that Tennessee's not had to sell in a long time.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, Josh Heupel included, every staff that's been here for 15 years, they've been on opportunity. You can play here now. We've got great fans. We have great facilities. Game day is awesome. And I mean, who recruits? Who's had the top? Who's been the best for the last decade? Ever? Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State. What do those programs have in common? They've won it. They've won the whole thing, and they can tell kids with a straight, hey, come here, you can compete for national championships. And for the first time in 20 years, Tennessee's head coach can say that going in. I mean, they don't have the trophy yet, but they proved on Saturday you can come here and you can compete for national championships. We can beat the best teams in the country.
And look, you can use Rick Barnes as an example. Once you get that resume building, the doors open differently, right, Rob? I mean,
and I think they've already started with Nico.
Yeah,
and now putting a season like this on top of a headline recruit like that, I mean, it's got the chance to snowball.
Yeah, Tennessee certainly cemented itself as a player with a win over Alabama, and it's going to be really fun rest of the season to see what happens, see what unfolds from that. Tennessee 52, Alabama 49. Chase McGrath, the knuckleball, just gets over. Guys, that would not have been good from 43, I'm telling you right now. But hey, it only needed to be good from 41. And it was good.
It would have had a good bounce at 41, Rob. It would have had to kick bounce all over the bar the right way. But it doesn't matter. As I think Brad Nessler said, it's the most beautiful, ugly kick you'll see. But it certainly got the job done for Tennessee.
All right. So a lot of fun happening over at Volquest.com. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed yet, don't know what you're waiting on, just cost you $1 for 1 year, and you'll get coverage, the best coverage on the number 3 team that just knocked off Alabama, and that is over at Volquest.com. If you're listening to this on YouTube, hit that like button, pound that like button, and please subscribe to the channel. That's Volquest at YouTube as well. For Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Cain, Tennessee. A winner over Alabama. We'll have UT Martin this week. We'll have plenty of coverage over at Volquest.com. This has been the Volquest Podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Podcast every week here on Volquest.